I would like to then ask you about your experience as an author. How has been your publishing journey? How has it been? Because this is not an easy business. I mean, very few people can do this full time. How has been your experience as an author in the publishing world, getting your book published, promoting it, getting it to readers, getting the feedback, and then getting the courage to write the next one and again doing the same, going through the same journey? How has it been your experience? How has it been your experience?
Well, as far as writing is concerned, I'll just deal with the last one first. As far as writing is concerned, doesn't really require too much courage because it's an obsession. So
True, true, true.
you're just following something that you like doing.
Yeah.
The- Now you're talking about, the publishing journey. I mean, I always say that writing is the fun part. Everything else, editing, proofreading, selling it, promoting it is work. That's pretty much it,
Yeah,
at the end of the day.
absolutely.
Now, my as far as my publishing journey is concerned, well, like I think every author, there are the good points, there are the bad points. I wish there were some things that I had done differently,
Mm.
and in some cases I wish I had read the fine print of contracts, more closely, especially in the beginning, because when you start out, you're so happy just to get published,
Yeah.
that uh, don't really pay much interest to that. And I'd worked through agents before I actually started working through them, because it's their job to negotiate and read contracts and do stuff like that. As far as publishing journey is concerned, as far as my books are concerned, I've dealt only with Indian publishers,
Right.
so I mean, anyway, on the shorter stuff, I've dealt all over the world. I mean, with the short stories, the essays, just where you are. I think you're in Berlin.
Yes. Yes.
Just last month, I published an essay in the Berlin Quarterly.
Oh,
You
really?
know,
Okay. So
so
you
that
find
was
these
just
shorter pieces easier, and this. So what has been your experience in terms of writing longer pieces? Like you mentioned that it is obviously easier to deal with the shorter pieces, and it's faster to get it out. So has your experience been more smoother in getting these literary pieces out in literary magazines and things like that?
no. It's like I know. Like I said, while teaching, they're easier to write during the semester
Yeah. Okay.
because they take less time. They have less. They have less bulk in them. After you've written 100 pages, you have to be fairly regular, because if you put it aside for 2 months, you forget everything, and then you got to get back in, which takes time. But something that's 20 pages long, 15 pages long, it's much easier to get back into it, while teaching. It's easier to write the longer pieces during the vacations, like the summer
Yes.
vacation or the winter break, or, stuff like that. So that's been there. But, as far as getting them out is that the West, and parts of Asia, they have they have many more literary magazines,
True.
and certainly many more paying gigs, in literary magazines, and also with due respect to Indian editors, who I'm sure do a very good job, but the editors that I have found in the West, have been maybe because there's more time or more money or whatever, but they're very they take they it's been a joy working with most of them, and they've done everything that they possibly can to get it, to the best that they possibly can. So that's been the one difference, in that sense. Like, even in India, I worked with some really good editors, but then I've also worked with some very indifferent editors,
Mhm.
in that. So it's been a mixed package.
Understood. And you said that there is a dearth of literary journals or opportunities to publish shorter literary pieces in India. But do you still have, because I haven't heard probably even a single literary journal in India, do you still have some options for writers who are writing short stories to get
Yeah,
published in literary magazines?
yeah, I did publish one story last year with the Punch
Punch,
magazine.
okay.
In October of 2020. It was a story about a couple dealing with a miscarriage, which came out in them. And they did a okay job, with, but you're right, as far as short fiction is concerned, I have published just about everything outside India, whether it's in Britain or in America or you know, Mekong Review was in Australia and then Hong Kong Review in China, and so everything I've published has been outside, India in that sense. So there is one, I think there's also Muse India, which is another one, and but but they tend to be almost exclusively digital
Yes,
magazines. I mean, and none of them has a print, sort of run in that sense. So it's all online publishing. And I don't know. I think maybe the Bombay Review pays. I don't know about the rest, but maybe they pay a little bit, but none of the others pay, while in the West you find many more paying gigs, for short work. In India, yeah, then I publish a lot of non-fiction in India with the Hindu and Frontline and all that. That's a different matter altogether. I mean, you do get a small check for them, in that sense, but then that's going more towards journalism and
correct,
nonfiction.
correct,
You know.
correct.
Yes.
So then, what about the readers? How would you think the evolution of the readers has been in India in the last probably a decade? Do you see, for example, do you see more of digital content being consumed as compared to paperback, hardcover books? Do you see people reading more books in general? Because that's a question that I always try to answer or try to solve. So,
Yeah.
what do you think about the readers and how they
Well,
evolved in India?
India is a mixed bag. Like you see, during the pandemic, in I think 2020 was the last because I mean, and actually the sales of books, adult books, I'm talking about not children
Commercial
book,
fiction, commercial.
but even the adult fiction, literary and commercial, the industries in America and Britain had a grand year,
Mm,
where
okay.
they sold many more books. People stayed home during the pandemic and they bought books en masse and they continued to read. In India, though, the publishers were in some strife, during the pandemic, and many of them, I think in 2020 at least, stopped acquiring books, new books for a while because they did not know how the industry was going or in that sense. So I think, you see, in India, there are a couple of issues. One issue is that I think that the reading habit is not developed at a young age,
Very,
in India,
very
unlike it
true.
is in the West. It is developed by parents or by schools
Absolutely.
or plethora of libraries and public libraries you have over there, and at a very young age, in the West, and it continues after that, not just the West, even in Japan and Korea and these particular countries. So that way, in India, on the other hand, in large sections of society, reading is considered is tantamount to getting an education.
Yeah.
People read for
Like,
exams,
correct.
people
Only
read
the
for
academic
to
books
get
are given
yeah,
prioritize.
yeah,
Priority.
to get into a career or all that, but not that much, for pleasure. So if reading is going to take off, that will have to change. I don't know how to do that, but that thing will have to change. Also, I think that I certainly know about the West, the literary culture is huge, in that sense. I mean, how it happens. There are in India now they have lit fests, but and quite a few of them, but but it's not like every library is having some sort of
Yes.
program every day where kids are being brought in and where everything is happening. And then I am lucky that I am teaching at one of the universities where creative writing is taught, so I teach in that. But in most Indian universities, creative writing to this day is not taught. you
Yes.
know
Yes.
while it all over the world it's taught now. I think if that happens, then I think the literary culture might actually pick up, because a lot of people would get into creative writing. There would be an industry around it. There would be an academic discourse, around it,
Very true.
and it would happen. But in India, still it is an outlier. So I think in India, I think it will take a lot of take a lot of time. And then specifically the kinds of books I write, stuff like literary fiction, I think for that you need it's a little different from writing, like commercial thriller or something like that. So for that you probably need a little bit more discerning reader, for that kind of stuff. So I think it will take time, but I'm hoping that things will get better as we
Yes,
go on.
yes. That is actually one of our like key, what I call like the driving force behind Writers Melon. Like the whole vision behind Writers Melon is we want to increase the number of readers, because it seems that a lot of people want to write, but it's very
Yeah.
hard to get people who are like really into reading, and getting a lot of people who read at least 10 books a year, or let's say 15 books a year.
No,
So
that's the sad part, because you can't be a good writer without being a good reader. So if you want to write, you should be reading, quite regularly. So
yes,
that is, that's, but one should remain optimistic.
yes,
And
true, true.
I think that as the country gets more sophisticated, better educated, all that thing, then I think people will want books, because see, books deliver something that no other media can deliver.
Correct.
In that sense, you were talking about, like, let's talk about fiction for a moment, in that. I mean, you were talking about history, and you were talking about, the role fiction maybe plays in teaching people
Retelling,
about
yeah,
history.
retelling the history, yes.
Yeah. So like, I'll give from my example. I've to this day, I haven't been tempted into picking up a book about a non-fiction book about the American Civil War. You know, I mean, or a biography or a historical book.
Very
But
true.
I've read a few novels about the American Civil War, and the one I'm reading right now, which is The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, which is about slavery, so which is the connected issue to the American Civil War. Now, I would never read about Black slavery in the southern part of the United States in a nonfiction book. I wouldn't be interested. But yeah, because I'm reading about it in a novel, I'm learning stuff, that I wouldn't have
Exactly,
learned,
exactly.
having fun in the process.
Very true. I think that's a very good point, because a lot of us read history just for exams and to pass the exams,
Yeah.
and probably just cram up the dates. Don't even know why
Mhm.
those dates are so important. Whereas what is important is the learning and what the people went through during that time. And we
Mhm.
often we are not taught that when we are studying history. We don't really learn about the impact or the learnings from those events for future. We are often just thrown with facts which are most of the times very boring and repetitive,
Mhm.
and do not have any connection with each other. So that I
Yeah,
think is
that's.
a very good attempt, and I'm often very drawn to historical fiction, and I love to read historical fiction just because of this reason, that it helps me get a good world view, like expand your world view about things, when you read history.
Mhm.
And now at this stage I feel I have missed on so much of historical, like history as a subject. I missed on so much information and so much of learning when I was reading history, although I got very good marks, but it is nowhere related to the knowledge or the wisdom you could probably get out of
Yeah,
reading it.
yeah. A novel will put faces on history.
Exactly, exactly.
Makes it more attractive, to
Very
go
true.
in to go into it. And as you were saying, whichever way you do it, is important to know history, because we tend to repeat history, and
Exactly.
we tend to repeat bad history, rather
Yes.
than good, the good
Yes.
history.
Yes.
It's as a people, as a nation.
I had so much